Hello, hello. Let's see, I'm using this new live stream here in the Facebook group. Hopefully it connects. Okay, I think I'm live. How exciting. Finally, I don't have to use my phone. How exciting. All right, let me adjust everything because this screen layout is a little bit different here. So let me know, can I be seen and can I be heard? That would be wonderful. I can see that one person is watching. So let me give it just a minute. I'll grab a sip. I've got lots of goodies to share with y'all today. I'm excited about this one. Hopefully I don't swallow my rosemary sprig on accident. All right, let's just dive in. Hi, Terry. Hello. Good to see you. I'm so glad you're joining us today. So if you don't know who I am, I'm Audrey. I'm a functional and integrative nurse nutritionist, energy medicine practitioner with Gemstone Well. I'm a certified crystal healer and advanced crystal master. I'm so excited to be hanging out with y'all today. This is, I say this every class. This is my favorite place to be. Hi, Judy. Welcome. Welcome to the Crystal Club. We're excited to have you. So I'm always so excited to hang out with y'all. It's one of my very favorite things to do, the highlight of my month, hanging out with y'all, you know, these 2 times a month. I wanted to welcome Judy. Welcome. And thank you to Dina for sharing our Crystal Club and bringing you in. We're excited for you to be a part of our crystal community here. While we're waiting for everyone to join, I'll do a little housekeeping. If you have questions, pop them in the comments. If I see them, I'll try to answer them right away. If not, I'll try to get to them at the end of class. And if we run out of time, I'll come back and type the answers in, but I won't leave you hanging. If you're watching this on the replay or you have some other crystal question or health and wellness question, feel free to put it in the group or in the thread here and tag me. Make sure you tag me so that the notification comes forward, because I get a lot of notifications and sometimes Facebook is wonky with the way they show them to me. Hello, Maria. Hello, Lori. Hi, hi, hi. I'm so excited y'all are here. As always, please note that there is a 30-second delay or up to a 30-second delay between us. So if I don't answer right away or I don't notice right away, it could be that. And as we've all experienced, sometimes Facebook gets tired of me talking and kicks me off. And if it does, I'll come right back on. And you might have to refresh the feed a few times for it to pop back up in the group, but I will be right back. And then Gemstone Well, our team there, will put the replay back together when they send it out. So let's dig in. Hey, Dina. I hope everyone's doing well. I'm so excited that everyone is here and able to join live. And whether you're joining live or on the replay, please comment and let us know that you're here. So let's dig in on creating sacred space. And this one is so much fun, right? Because one, who doesn't love to rearrange a room or create something new or have an excuse to go buy new fun things, right? Especially right now when I feel like I haven't shopped in eons. But sometimes, honestly, creating sacred space can fall to the bottom of our to-do list. It can get lost. And sometimes we feel like we have to perfect it, right? Before it's truly sacred, before we can start using it, or before we can even start implementing it. And sometimes we create a whole bunch of ground rules around what our sacred space should be. And sometimes sarcastically, I like to call it shooting all over ourselves, if you get the drift. So I want to teach this in a way that inspires you to get out there and do it, whether it's perfect or not, or whether you have the exact right space or the exact right items. And I want you to know that anything will do in creating sacred space, and that you can create sacred space on your person. You can create sacred space in your immediate environment, and you can take that with you everywhere that you go. So I want to start off with a quote. And it's by Hermann Hesse from Siddhartha is the reading or the poem or book. And it's, within you, there is a stillness and a sanctuary to which you can retreat at any time and be yourself. And so that really kind of sums up our goal here. I share that quote because I want you to know, no matter what your physical space is, no matter what your situation is, no matter what you have around you in your immediate environment, I mean, I've joked with people, and really it's fairly serious. You can create sacred space on a crowded subway in New York City, right? You always have the ability to create and find that refuge. And hopefully we're going to give you some of the tools to do that today. So, so as I said, a lot of times our lives are super busy, and even though for a while maybe they haven't been busy, like we've been pretty stuck, in our own spaces at home and with our own people. But life is returning, back to whatever normal is going to be. And it's really easy to get our lives back to being so busy that we don't find time for that self-care, that peace, that relaxation, to ground ourselves, or to even take the time and space to evaluate what direction that we're headed, right? So sometimes we don't even think about checking in with our internal compasses and find out, like, all this busyness, is it taking me in the direction that I want to go? Is it taking me in the direction of my hopes and dreams and goals? And what are those? So I'd love for you to put in the comments if you feel like sharing. And if you don't, that's okay. But put in the comments if you found yourself in a space where tasks and to-do lists take precedence over self-care and over your quiet reflection time. And just know that there's no right or wrong answer. It happens to all of us, right? Even this morning, I found myself in a position where I got up, came to my sacred space to meditate, and just before I sat down, I kind of made the loop. Like, I went through the kitchen and came to my sacred space, but I stopped and grabbed my phone to save me a trip. And my phone doesn't live in my bedroom. I'm hardcore against phones in the bedroom. I think the EMFs and all that's a discussion for another day. But we don't have any devices in the bedrooms. So I circled by and grabbed my phone. And just as I was coming to sit down, out of habit, I opened my email. Like, I swiped open my phone and opened my email and started to read an email. And then I almost got sucked in, right? Almost got sucked in, breaking my rule for meditation first, right? Get up, pee, meditate. But almost got sucked in. And then luckily I set my phone down, sat down and did my meditation. But it happens even when we have the most rigid and long-standing rituals or practices or habits for our morning. It's really, really easy. And I'm not the only one that makes this mistake. Again, luckily I was able to turn back to meditation, set the phone down, come back to that email 20 minutes later, and guess what? It was still there. Nothing had changed, right? But I was able to come back to it with having had that quiet reflection and self-care time. Now, sometimes it doesn't show up like that. And as a mom and as a woman and all of those things, it's really easy for me to put someone else's needs in front of my own. And I'm sure you guys have experienced that too, right? It happens. We put other people's needs, be it spouses or children's or partners or work or whoever it is, being the givers that we are, we put other needs in front of our own health, our own wellness, our own body, mind, and spirit. I see a few more people popping in. Dina says, yes, definitely. Carolyn says, hi. Hello, Carolyn. Welcome. Terry says that she gets sucked in a lot. I feel ya. It happens to all of us, right? So today I'm really hoping that you find something that resonates with you so that you can start to make those little changes and start to get out of the rut and start to practice self-care more regularly so that you can do it in a restored place of refuge and peace in your immediate environment and internally as well. So there was an interesting study that I was recently introduced to by my mentor, Hibiscus Moon. She cited a Yale study that showed that holding, and I don't have a cup of coffee, but holding a warm cup of coffee changes the mood and the physical output of humans, of our human suit, right? Like, it lowers blood pressure, it increases the happiness neurotransmitters. Just holding a cup of coffee creates that positive change, in contrast to holding kind of a cold, yucky cup of coffee from this morning, right? Like if I had still had my morning cup of coffee on my desk. In the same way, we know that if we feel something different, even if it's just looking at a crystal, and I don't have like a super pretty one within reach because they're in order of how I'm going to talk to y'all about them. But even holding a crystal or even looking at a crystal and noticing, oh, wow, that's pretty. That changes us, that sets off neurotransmitters in the same way that holding that warm cup of coffee does, right? It's evidence of changing something for us, improving something, even if it's just brief, right? So we're going to take that direction when we're going through this today and take that Yale science study and expand that into sacred space. So I want to start with defining what is sacred space. And it's kind of interesting because no matter who you ask or what corner of the interwebs or books, I have loads of books that all mention sacred space in different ways. you'll find at least a somewhat slightly different answer as to what is sacred space. Mostly it falls into themes, right? You can kind of put them all together. Like a sacred space is peaceful, it's safe, it's renewing, it's rejuvenating, it's protective, it's quiet. If you guys have other ideas of what a sacred space is, be sure and put them in the comments and share, because everyone has a different perspective, right? Just like everything else that I talk about in my practice and the things that I do, there's no one size fits all. And so for me, I have sacred spaces in my home. And I strive for my entire home to feel like a sacred space, but I share my home with my family, right? So, I also have what I would consider a confidence in creating my own sacred space wherever I go. And that's what I want for you. So let me know in the comments if you feel like creating a sacred space is easy. And if you don't, then that's okay too. Just let me know why maybe you don't feel like it's easy. There's no wrong answers here. And if you are catching this on the replay again, you can comment and come back, just tag me so I make sure and see it. And if you're watching outside of the Facebook group, because we have a number of crystal clubbers that are not in the Facebook group, then I encourage you to sort of explore that in your journal. What are your boundaries? What are your blocks, if you will, to understanding or feeling that, having a confidence that a sacred space can be anywhere? And while y'all are thinking about that, I'm going to grab a sip. And then we're going to get into the steps. And we're going to talk about two different things. We're going to talk about steps to creating a sacred space in your environment. So, I mean, like in your home or in your office or wherever you might be, outdoors, if that is where you prefer your sacred space. And then we're also going to talk about some quick ways to create sacred space on your person, right? Okay, let me take a quick sip. I'm really worried I'm going to swallow that rosemary. It's been hanging out in my cup all day. Okay. Steps to creating a sacred space in your immediate environment. The very first thing you have to do is envision your space, right? And I don't necessarily mean you have to like dream it up and close your eyes and envision this space, but that can work as well. But what I want you to do is have some concrete boundaries around envisioning your space so that you don't get stuck in planning mode, because you can plan until you never get around to making your sacred space, right? You make lists and lists and lists and lists, things you want, you create Pinterest boards, and then you never actually get to the action part. So the first step is to set a timer for 5 minutes and create a personalized definition of what sacred space is to you, right? My favorite way to do this is to really tune in and listen to your inner voice, that spirit that's present inside of you, and also listen to the spirit of your space, right? Because maybe you built that house, so maybe you built the house that you're in, so you're listening to the spirit of the land that it's on. Maybe you live in somebody else's house, or a house that, you bought a house that was already existing, which is super common. Or you are renting a space, or maybe you're in a space that's not your own. And so tune in and feel the information that the space can give you itself. I think that part of creating a sacred space is being a steward, not only for your own energy, but also working in tune with the energies that are around you in your existing environment. And so you might want to put this in a journal, which is where I tend to put all of my things, especially things that I want to remember. Or you might start a new journal just about creating a sacred space for yourself. I also recommend that when you're doing this, when you're trying to tune into this, you work with a stone that brings clarity for you. For me, my primary clarity stone is clear quartz. It's what you'll find me working with most of the time when I'm talking about clarity. There are lots of other stones that can bring people clarity. And if you guys have some, if you want to make suggestions for each other in the comments, feel free to share other stones that you feel bring you clarity. Again, it's not a one size fits all thing, but clear quartz is kind of the textbook definition of the clarity stone, right? So this exercise, creating your definition, should really only take about 5 minutes. And it's really easy to get stuck in, I gotta be perfect mode. So I really encourage you to set a timer if you need to, right? And I have a meditation actually that I use for this sometimes. So if y'all want me to put that in the group, then just let me know and I can upload it later this week or early next week into the group so that you can do it, because there's going to be homework. So once you create that definition, and you go through all these steps, then you can go back and you can look at Pinterest for inspiration and all of these places and make adjustments and change the space to fit any new needs or new inspiration. Let's see. I'm going to look at the comments here. Dina says you saw that post. I think you're talking about hibiscus moon. Lori wants to know what's in my bottle. That is a sprig of rosemary. I this morning did energy medicine and herbal sessions and crystal sessions on large animals, on horses. And so I had an extra piece of rosemary that wasn't used. And so I just popped it in my water bottle on the way back. So that's what's in my water bottle. Just some rosemary, and it's rosemary out of my yard, out of my garden. So we built this house and we started replacing all of the landscaping that the builder put in, because by the time I got to it's time to put in landscaping, my head was not where it should have been. So I let them just put in, bushes. And so we've been replacing those bushes with herbs or fruit bearing, growing food, not lawns type thing, but still staying within the bounds of the homeowners association, which is a different story. But that is rosemary from the front flower beds. So let's see. What other questions do we have? Dina says, hard for me, because like you said, I share with my hubby and son. Absolutely. I have 2 kids and a husband that run around in this house. And so I'll talk about how to sort of manage that with other people too, especially kids, when we get to that section. So step 1, we're making a definition. We're creating a definition of what sacred space means to you, right? And I encourage you, when you're making the definition, to make it how it needs to feel for you. I don't think I mentioned that before, but rather than saying a sacred space to me is, white walls and green plants and this, think about how it feels. So when you think about green plants, those feel fresh. Those feel alive, right? Think about what you want that sacred space to feel like, because that can open you up to so many more possibilities on what it can be. Okay, the second thing you're gonna do is gather what you need to make this happen. And I encourage you to just gather the things that you have in your immediate environment. It might mean pulling stuff from different rooms. It might mean taking some pictures from different rooms. It might mean bringing the outdoors in. So grabbing a potted plant or bringing a potted plant into your sacred space. But I want you to think of a few different categories. I want you to think of color and texture. And this, of course, can evoke different emotions and different energies. And we've learned that back in some of the chakra information, the chakra videos, that colors have a specific frequency and can change the vibrations in a room, in your space, just like it can in your body. So I want you to consider every color. I like to stick to the chakra colors because it's just my thing. Like, even my bookshelf is arranged in the chakra colors. My oils are arranged in the chakra colors. My crystals are arranged. It's just my thing. I like rainbows, right? So I want to tell you a little bit about some colors when you're thinking of when you've got your feelings and your emotions down from your definition, right? Then how does that translate into colors? Well, when you think of white, think of, and some of these are outside of the chakras, right? So when you think of white, think of purity and cleanliness and hope and freshness. White is also a modern feeling. Yellow, happy, joy, confidence, right? Orange, warmth, cheerfulness, rejuvenation, flow, and optimism. Red, love, passion, vitality. For some, red can borderline on anger, but it can also be boldness and energetic and protection. Pink is often associated with things like romance and compassion and love and serenity. Purple, wisdom, creativity, luxury sometimes, reflection, royalty, dignity, and magic. Also vision and spirituality. Green or blue is trust and strength and communication and integrity and intelligence. And green is peace and growing and freshness, right? Safety and relaxation and balance. Brown is earthy and authentic and rich and simple and traditional. Black is often associated with sophistication and mystery and death and formality and groundedness and ancestors, which can be interesting for some to bring into a sacred space. And then gray is often calmness and stability and maturity and strength. Now, those are not an end-all be-all, right? There's lots of definitions. So I encourage you to look at your feeling and then think of what color associates with that feeling for you. And then Also, turn to Google and see what color associates that for you. Now, I'm not encouraging you to necessarily go and paint all the walls that color, but just bring that color in, either in crystals or in books or in blankets or textures or cushions or pictures. Anything can work. The second thing I want you to think about here is texture, right? And so for texture, think of contrasting texture, or maybe smooth texture makes you, like all a similar texture makes you feel better or safer or more peaceful, right? But you can contrast tapestries and add wood elements and metal and copper, contrasting in different stones and crystals, although we're going to cover those in a different section. But that's sort of the next space, is determining the colors. Let's see, before I go on to step 3, Maria says that you noticed my books. Yay, I'm so glad you noticed my books. I really, like, if you let me loose, I will color code everything. So, but yes, and it makes it easy because I always remember, and I don't know if any of y'all are the same, but when I'm thinking of a book, I'm like, I know I have that book. It's usually the color of the cover that I can remember. And so it's really helpful when I'm looking for a book to be able to think, okay, that book was red, and go right to it. And these are my reference books here that are, I use pretty frequently. I've started converting my reading for pleasure, which I do read these for pleasure because I'm a nerd like that, but I've started converting most of my reading for pleasure books to Kindle simply for storage reasons, because I don't want to create a whole room in my house that's a library. So reference books make it to the shelf, and then pleasure books or books that I don't ever intend to use for reference, they usually live on a device. Let's see. Okay. So the third thing, so far we've created our definition. We found the colors and gathered the items to bring that definition to life, right? The third thing I want you to think about is sound. And a lot of people don't consider sound, but if you think about it, is it quiet in your house? Is it quiet where you live? Noise pollution is really a big thing in our world, right? And it always, a lot of times, especially if you stay in the same area, you don't realize until you get to somewhere that's actually quiet how much noise there is, right? So for me personally, I like quiet. Noise is not my friend. I don't like background noise. I'm not a huge fan of white noise, but I do use it in some instances. But that could be different for you. So I want you to think about the noise in your sacred space. If you can hear other people talking and that distracts you from your Zen mode or your serenity, then maybe some kind of white noise or gentle music could be helpful for you. It could be that you need a noise to bring you in to the mindset of really taking care of yourself and rejuvenating in your sacred space. And there's a couple of different things that I liked for that. So this is a chime. This is really inexpensive. I think it was, I don't know, $9 maybe on Amazon. And we got this chime, and it makes a pretty high pitched sound, but we got this chime when the kids were little. And it was our cue to, like, if there was arguing going on, or if there was some kind of icky energy in the house, then we'd ring the chime and then let the sound fade out, right? And so maybe having something like this for you, I just about chimed it, putting the stick back up, but it still lives in the entry hall so the kids can chime it whenever they want. But having something like this for you could signify to your other members of your family. It could signify to you, and I explained this little fella here. So if you guys pop on and let me know, I see one person's on. Pop on and let me know if y'all heard everything about the chime. And if you did, I will move on to the bowl. I'll give you just a second. Take a sip. Carolyn says, I'm here again. Hooray! I'm back. Lori's here. Awesome. Let's hope Dina and Judy and everyone make it back. You know, it's kind of weird. You know, you really want Facebook to work really well, but then you recognize that they let you use the platform for free. And so you're kind of, Carolyn says the home, yes. Okay. So when my kids were little, we used the chime, right? And then now creating sacred space is more used with a singing bowl. And this is a little one. And I have bigger ones too. But a lot of times I'll play the singing bowl or strike the singing bowl to bring myself into that sacred setting, that sacred space. And it can be quite meditative to play the singing bowl yourself, right? If noise is really, really a problem for you, then I suggest getting a white noise machine from Amazon. It'll seem really annoying at first, but then eventually it sort of blends in and it can mute other sounds. And then alternatively, of course, you can use headphones, right? Headphones always work. Or even noise canceling headphones. But sound is often overlooked, and it's one of the really important aspects of sacred space. Terry says she loves bringing elements into your space. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great way to do it too. Another thing to consider for your sacred space is aromatherapy. So maybe it's the scent of natural plants that works for you. Maybe it's something like a diffuser that works for you. Maybe you have a smaller space or you don't want that scent diffusing all day. So maybe it's something like a little oil burner. So you can see these all used to be the same color, right? But there's a little candle in there, and you can just put 2 or 3 drops of essential oil in here and then light the candle, and it's just enough for a meditation or 30 minutes or so in a sacred space. And it takes out for me, it takes out I gotta go get water and fill up my diffuser and do all the things. I love a diffuser for just creating whatever that aromatic effect is, bringing up or down the energy, however you need to use it in a larger space over a bigger span of time. But just sitting down in my sacred space to do some quick journaling or to kind of shake off whatever issues or vibes I've picked up during the day, then I really like to use something smaller like this little oil burner, or I'll put a drop of essential oil in my hand, rub it together, and then do a quick scent tint. Because really, to have that essential oil affect the cells in your body, affect the vibration of your human suit, it just has to be activated through the limbic system, right? And we know that oils are plant medicine on the one end, but they also have a specific frequency that we can use for healing and changing our emotional and energetic state as well. And then probably my favorite category is considering crystals for your sacred space. Now, for baseline crystals, if you have a sacred space that is a permanent corner in your house, a permanent spot for you, and there's some crazy creative ones, right? Like, a little spot in an office or a closet even, or even just a little altar that you can take different places with you. But if you have a sort of a set space for your sacred space that is yours and you can keep the kids and stuff out of it, then I really like neutral crystals that live there all the time. So for me, that is something like selenite. And a friend of mine actually has a selenite slab, which is super cool. But selenite is really good for that. As I mentioned before, clear quartz is always a part of sacred space for me because it brings clarity and clears the brain fog. And I really feel like it helps me to connect faster. Amethyst, and I know y'all seen this amethyst before, but it's the only one small enough to hold up on camera. It was also my first sort of decorative piece, if you will. But amethyst is a really good one. Amethyst does have some specific healing properties, just like they all do, but it's also, remember, it's what we call the jack of all crystals, right? So amethyst is kind of like your frankincense or your lavender if you're into aromatherapy. So it's a really good sort of baseline crystal to have in any room of the house, but specifically also in sacred space, right? Those are kind of some of the ones that I like to be the pillars of space. And then depending on what energy I might be working with in that time, you might also find like Lemurian. I have this Lemurian point that I've been working with lately. Moldavite and garnet are two that I've been working with a lot lately. And so I'll bring these in for meditation, and honestly, sometimes I leave them behind, but you can bring in specific crystal energies to work with one-on-one. Another often overlooked one, because it's not actually a crystal because it was alive at one point, is petrified wood. That can be really, really nice in a sacred space as well, or natural wood even. And then another thing to consider is having grids and other stones, right? So you have your base crystals, your selenites and your amethyst and your clear quartz and all of that, but you might also have a grid in your sacred space, or your sacred space might just be a grid. I have a grid, I don't know if you can see it behind me, that's been up since February, right? And I leave them up, as we've discussed, I leave them up until the purpose has been served, and it hasn't been served yet, mostly because of the virus that came in, but it hasn't been served yet. So it's still up, and I'm still sending energy to it and working with it and resetting it as needed. I usually also have out in a sacred space my throat chakra. My throat chakra has always been a little funny. So, you guys have seen me use this blue celestite as well. And then if I'm feeling particularly ungrounded, then I recommend using one of the darker stones. So this is hematite to provide some grounding, right? So as far as crystals in your space, we're talking base crystals, neutral stuff that's not going to overpower things one way or another. I like to think of them as supportive crystals, right? And then secondarily, my video went off again, but I'm going to keep talking until y'all tell me I'm gone. So secondarily, then I'll talk about, then I'll bring in whatever stone energies that I'm working with. Another thing to consider is gifts from nature. And so I have things that I've collected. I call them gifts, so they'll show up on my walking path, for example, or in my garden when I'm gardening. And so some of the things that I like to include in my sacred space are like a bobcat skull. And I didn't kill this bobcat. I found it, and it's got this green stuff on it because we're working on growing crystals on it. But it's a part of my sacred space. And bobcats bring the energy of strength and success and decisiveness. I really hope y'all can still see me. Another thing I like to use often is feathers. And so this is a vulture feather. Again, it was just in my walking path. I didn't pluck the vulture. And vultures bring rebirth and transformation. They're really good at picking clean the heart and solar plexus chakra. And if you think of what they do out in nature, it's also pick things clean. And then like this hawk feather. And hawks are very much about trusting your inner vision. This one's getting a little wonky. Trusting your inner vision and spirit messages and those kind of things. So those can be really, really important for sacred spaces as well. And then the very last one, as far as creating your sacred space in your environment, is taste. And I don't mean like decorative taste. Lori can still see me. All right, I'm gonna keep going then. The last one is taste. And taste is often overlooked, right? Because you think of sacred spaces as the stuff around you, but there's lots of drops that you can get. This one is Medicina Pachamama, and it's a drop that you put under your tongue. It's made from herbs. It's a drop that you can put under your tongue for to enhance your meditation, and it doesn't mentally alter you or anything like that. But another one that I really like is Forest Folk Fungi. This one is Mushroom Immunity because it was the only one I could grab in time, but they also have one called Crystal Clear Clarity that is really good for meditation and for spending time journaling and in sacred space. And so I told you guys I would also talk about, I'm gonna grab a quick drink. Judy says that's cool. So I see some comments about some of my gifts from nature. I have set the intention to find gifts from nature, and they just pop up in the most interesting times and places. Okay, so we talked about taste. So side note, one thing I overlooked for many, many years, right, is making room for other family members and children. And so not just making it appropriate for whatever age your kids are. My sacred spaces are often low to the ground. I like to sit on the ground, and that's probably my yoga background, but I like to sit on the ground or low to the ground. So it's always been in reach of little hands. And now that my little hands are 9 and 12 years old, it's not as big of a problem, but kids are naturally curious. And so it's really important to consider them, not just from a safety aspect of, putting stones in their mouth and different things, but also in an aspect of if you can ingrain in them early that there is a place that they can go and feel safe and rejuvenated and protected and to clear their head and regain control of their energies and their emotions, then I really think it transforms the big humans that they become from these little humans into much more grounded and centered and spiritually, gives them a spiritual epness, right? So my philosophy, and it's okay if you don't agree with my philosophy, that's totally fine. We all have different paths, right? But I really think that my philosophy is to expose your kids to life beyond themselves as much as possible, right? Because it brings out so many good learning opportunities and discussions. And so either sharing your sacred space with your kids, if that's the kind of relationship that you have, or allowing your kids to use your sacred space respectfully, or even setting the boundary so that they know that when you are in your sacred space, that is your time, right? So my kids will come by the French doors by my sacred space, and I can almost feel them go whoops, and they kind of tiptoe backwards. They know for those 20 minutes, if they get up in the morning, or those 20 minutes that happens round about 2:30 in the afternoon, usually I'll give them a heads up like, hey, I'm going to meditate. But that time is sacred because we have a boundary. Now they also know that if they need to take that time, they can use my sacred space, or we've set up sacred spaces in their rooms for them as well. And so for my older daughter, kind of her whole room is her sacred space. And for my younger daughter, she has a little corner of her room that's set up with a crystal grid that she did herself. I didn't have any input there, but a crystal grid that she did herself. It's got a salt lamp, it's got her diffuser, and it's got like this squishy beanbaggy type chair, and that's her sacred space to go and stay. So I encourage you to do that. Another thing that's important once you get your sacred space set up is to cleanse your space routinely. If you guys hang out with me on Facebook, you know that I cleanse. I do a Monday morning sage no matter what. And I say sage as a verb rather than a noun. Sometimes it's a sage smudge. If you guys have been hanging out there, then you know that I'm super stuck on this sage smudge right now because it's gorgeous, and it's got the roses, which brings in the heart chakra, and then it's got the little clear quartz, which is just my favorite. But I'll also use rosemary, or juniper is another one that I reach for a lot, and other herbs in my garden. I'll mix dandelions in, all that sort of thing. I'll even use a spray, and this one is sage essential oil and citrus and some witch hazel. You can also use cheap vodka for that. Or a Palo Santo spray or a Palo Santo stick. I see Dina is asking my thoughts on Palo Santo spray, and I'm not sure. I think it's fine to use that to create sacred space and to cleanse a space. I like people to be really cautious about ethically sourced Palo Santo. So Palo Santo is endangered as a species of tree, but you can find sources that only harvest fallen branches, if that makes sense. And yes, it means that instead of paying $1, you'll probably have to pay $8 for a little stick of Palo Santo. But I think it's worthwhile to preserve that diversity in nature, personally. And again, if you don't agree, that's okay. That's just me. So in short, Dina, I think Palo Santo spray is fine. A lot of people have sensitivity to smoke, so I encourage you to use aromatherapy diffusers for that. If you have a sensitivity to aromatherapy diffusers, you can just use your hands. So in the same way that you would waft smoke all in all the corners and doorways and places in your home, you can rub your hands together and then just send the energy out with the intention of doing the same thing. You can also enhance this by using a crystal to do that. So you use the crystal like a laser wand, and you can either do this, or you can use the crystal itself to get rid of that energy. You can also use feathers, natural or not, for that purpose as well. And sometimes I'll use a combination of things, right? But cleansing your space is really, really important. And one other way you can cleanse, of course, is sound. We know that sound changes the vibration in a way that is perceivable to our five senses. So that's a really good way to do it as well. You can turn up loud music, you can play singing bowls, you can use chimes, whatever is soothing and peaceful and feels positive to you. Dina says, yes, you read about the fallen branches. Awesome. And you love sage, but your son is not a fan. You know, my youngest daughter has gone through periods where she hasn't been a fan of sage. She kind of, oh, mom's doing it again, you know. But then if she has a bad dream, she'll say, Mom, I need you to come smudge my room. So, you know, they may not seem like they're learning and catching on, but they certainly are. Another way to do it, to cleanse a space or cleanse a sacred space, or even just create a sacred space without tools, is to just take a big deep breath and blow it out, and then envision a bright white light just washing it all away, washing it away on your person, washing it away in your space. If you're on an airplane, I've used this trick on an airplane, washing it away, just no matter where you are. So you can create that sacred space anywhere. So speaking of that, once you have your sacred space statement, again, I feel like you can create it anywhere without any tools at all. Now, tools are more fun, right? We all love our crystals and our oils and our sage and all of those things. But know that you don't need any of those things. Those are just enhancements, right? Those are just extra tools, right? So once you have your sacred space statement, right, your definition of what a sacred space is to you, then I want you to think of a couple other ways that you can do this, of how you can create that for yourself no matter what. So one way to do that is having crystals on your person. So, we've all talked about our bracelets and our rings. These are diffuser earrings that I may have talked about before. So I put a few drops of essential oil on them, and it allows me to have the aromatherapy without encroaching on others, which I'm a big proponent of. I don't necessarily need somebody else's aromatherapy, and I don't want to force my aromatherapy on someone else. So I try to keep it compact, right? But you can create that sacred space anywhere that your person goes. So one way, again, wearing the sacred space jewelry, having a crystal in your pocket or in your bra even, although be careful, I've washed them and had them hit the tile floor and break and all sorts of things. One way, of course, is, what brought you all here, creating sacred space on your person by using a gem elixir, putting herbs in your water like I did today. Another thing you can do is add fruit to your water and include it in your gem elixir. And one of my favorite things to do there is, right now I'm stuck on raspberry mint lime. And so you just crush it all up, put it in your water. I like to strain it out because I don't like to pick raspberry seeds out of my teeth. But that is a really good way to do it. Another way that a lot of people don't think of is by creating what I call a proxy grid, or I didn't coin that phrase, lots of people use that phrase, but you create a proxy grid on your person using something like a proxy board. Now I have a fancy proxy board that's hand carved and reclaimed wood and all of those things. However, you could just draw a stick figure on a piece of paper, or if you have a chakra blanket or a chakra towel, you can use those as well. You can print out this little dude and, put the crystals on them. And so the way I would use something like this to create sacred space is, if there was something intentional that I was working on, then I would lay stones out on the human silhouette. Otherwise, I would set my intention and then use these stones in the sacred geometry pattern around it this will be a trick if I can do this without spilling it, to create a bubble, if you will, a sacred space bubble that I am intending to go with me wherever I go. So a lot of times we'll do this when we travel, and we'll either create something like this, and the kids will do one and I'll do one. Hard pressed to get hubby to do one most of the time, but we'll create something like this, or we'll take a big deep breath in, and then I call it putting on our bubbles, and we'll put on our pink or purple or green bubble associated with whatever the feeling is that we want to bring with us, whatever that sacred space is that we want to keep going with us, right? And so that's one way to do it when you travel. I also carry crystals with me when I travel. I usually have my elixir to go bottle, because I have lots of fun conversations at the airport with those, but my elixir to go bottle, and then I usually bring a small chakra set with me, and then some hematite or labradorite. Lori says, I didn't know you could put fruit in your elixir bottle. So you've got to be willing to get a brush in there and clean it out when you're done, but you can put fruit and all kinds of stuff in there. And I see some other questions popping up, and I'll come back and get those too. But using something like a proxy grid is a great way to intend, and intention is everything, right? But intend that sacred space to stay with you all the time. Another thing you can do is put crystals in your car. I have crystals stashed all over my car too, for safety and to keep the peace, because sometimes on long car trips, the peace can get we can get a little snappy with each other. Both my husband and I and the kids, and it's just a small space and a lot of people sometimes. I like to use rose quartz. I like to use smoky quartz. Every once in a while I'll put amethyst in there. Labradorite is one that I carry in my purse. I have a labradorite palm stone that I like to use when tensions get high. And then another thing I wanted to mention is that you can create or intend a bigger sacred space with your home by gridding your home, which is always really cool. You can use black tourmaline. This house we built, so I was able to crystal grid the foundation before the foundation was poured. So there's a grid under the foundation, as well as, okay, Judy didn't hear the proxy grid. I'm coming back for the proxy grid. So I was able to grid the foundation, as well as after we lived here, I discovered that we were on sacred grounds, both sacred native grounds, as well as, we live in a neighborhood, right? So we didn't just pick a plot of land and unknowingly build on sacred ground. That we were sold a lot in a neighborhood that was on sacred ground. And then later on top of that, found out that there is a burial site from the 1800s, that the creek that runs through our backyard is part of a flooded burial site where there was actually a cemetery, a graveyard. And it was flooded when they flooded the town that is now under the lake, if that makes sense. It really doesn't make sense. When I found it out, I was super freaked out. But one of the things we did was grid the house with black tourmaline once it was standing, and then also with copper tubes to connect it all in place. All right, so let me go back. Judy said you didn't hear about the proxy grid. So I want to make sure that I cover that, because that's one of the easiest ways to sort of set it and forget it. And if you can set it and forget it, then that means it's simple and sustainable enough that you'll do it, right? And that's the whole thing. So this is a proxy grid or proxy grid board. And this one was handmade by a friend of mine that's also a crystal healer, and it's from Reclaimed Pinewood in Pennsylvania. And she sent it to me, and I love it. And it's like my prized possession, because she did this all by hand. Her and her husband did this all by hand. So you can lay a grid out on the person if there's something specific you want to work on. But what I like to do is use the sacred geometry around it to intend that sacred space, that grace to come with me everywhere I go. And so you just take smaller stones, and you would put them in a circle, or I'll use these things around it to create that sacred space, that sacred gridding. And then you leave it, and you allow that to be your window to your sacred space as you go. So I hope that, Maria, what does the copper do? The copper is just a really good conductor. So it helps to connect all the points of the house and all the points of the property. Judy says, cool idea, gridding the foundation. Thank you. I would always grid my foundation now, but I expect our next home won't be one I'll build, because I don't want to build another house. But if you don't have this fancy proxy grid or a proxy distance board like this, you can use a towel with the chakras on it. You can print out a piece of paper that has a human suit on it or some sacred geometry on it. You can use, you can draw a stick figure on a piece of paper and put it around it. And sometimes when we don't think to do this, we'll put on our bubbles, right? So we'll just energetically take a big deep breath in. As we exhale, we're blowing up our bubbles. So we envision the auras blowing out, and you create that bubble of protection, and you intend that only positivity goes out and the negativity is fostered. Negativity, danger, things that don't make you feel safe energetically, emotionally, or even physically are sort of filtered out by that bubble. So I want to give you guys some homework, okay? So I want you to do the exercise. I think there were 7 steps. Most importantly, creating your statement of what a sacred space is to you, and then create your sacred space. It doesn't have to be, there's no wrong way to do it. And show us a little pic or make a little video, and I'll make a separate post for that. Let me know if you guys want the meditation, and I can add that to the group as I'm doing all that fun stuff. And then if you have any questions, I know there were some questions on the last feed about sage. I have a couple different kinds of sage growing in my garden. White sage is usually the one. I do make some of my own sage bundles. That one was a gift. The one with the roses that I showed earlier. That one was a gift. But it's also white sage, which is what I have growing right now. Primarily, what's growing really well right now is white sage. You can use any herb. You can use mint, you can use rosemary, you can use just about anything, just how it feels to you. And so if you are feeling called to wrap up some dandelion leaves and use that, then do that. I made one the other day out of rosemary and then wildflowers out of the yard, and it's still hanging up drying. So there's no wrong way to do it. I use hemp cord or cotton for the cord to wrap it as well. Dina says yes, meditation. Maria says yes, meditation. Judy says I'm a total newbie, so all this information is great. Okay, so Judy, Judy wants to learn about gridding. There's a video here in the group on gridding. I encourage you to check that out and let me know what questions you have. We are going to go through the chakras for the next few classes and really dive deep. I know we've done a class on the chakras as a whole. We're going to dive deep on those chakras and how to really get into them and explore them in different ways. Of course, using crystals, but also I always like to give you things that don't require you to have a crystal, because then you think, well, gosh, I really need to work on my root chakra, but I don't have any root chakra stones. Good news, you don't necessarily have to have those. So if you guys don't have any other questions, thank you all for being so patient with this, with the video stopping and dropping and all of those things. It's a brand new system. Remember last time I had to use my phone because they updated it and it wouldn't work. So I expect that it is Facebook sort of figuring out the bugs, and I'll be reporting this when I'm done. So I hope everyone has a magical rest of their day and weekend. I'll put the post up for homework. I'll add the meditation and we'll go from there. Be well.